Hey, beautiful humans. Welcome to another Be the Glitter podcast episode where we talk about tough topics with giggles and leave you with inspiration that sticks. I'm thrilled to introduce you to my guest, Tawni Sofia Acosta, an incredible trans woman who's changing lives as a coach for LGBTQ entrepreneurs. In this episode, Tawny shares her wisdom on transforming personal wounds into beautiful scars, expanding your comfort zone to build confidence, and why self-care is essential for business success. She also explores the profound impact of holding space for others in our community. So beautiful. This conversation is packed with both practical advice and soul-touching moments. So I hope that you will stick through the full episode and stay tuned to the end to hear about my new giveaway. Enjoy. It's just so nice to see you again. I missed your voice. I missed your energy. We only had a virtual coffee once last year. I know you've been very busy. You might not even remember it, but I do. And I remember feeling goosebumps from that conversation for weeks afterwards.
Oh my God.
I want to thank you so much for being you. And thank you so much for being here. That means a lot to me. And I hope that it means a lot to other people who get to experience everything that you share in our little session today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Well, as you'd say in Spanish, igualmente. I just feel the same, likewise. And, we're all here navigating this the best we can.
Yeah, we certainly can. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, not only, here you are now as a life coach. You've also had, something we have in common, but in a different flavor is totally changing our life. Like not that long ago, actually, right? We both made some big changes and moved to different places to where we felt like we could be our authentic selves. And in that, doing some pivoting and fine tuning as to how we can truly show up with the purpose that we want to bring to the people that we need to help. So I'll let you tell your little short story of who you are and how you help people.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the time to explain. My name is Tawni Sofia Acosta. I am a transgender woman. My profession right now, my second career. Prior to this, I worked at Impact for ages, for a long time. Probably the last position I had was project manager. I work as a life coach, and it's this interesting intersection between life coach and entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Okay, which is a little therapy. And it's funny, early on in this process, I had some really deep conversations with people in my inner circle. At one time, I was considering going into digital therapy or going into coaching. And then I opted to go into coaching. And I think it suits my personality better because really coaching, the focus, there's definitely an intersection between therapy and coaching. And I'm using coaching in its broadest sense of the word. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's an intersection between the two. And there's things that I don't touch. I'm not going to work with like deep maladies of, schizophrenia, or BPD or something like that. Yet there's an intersection of dealing with depression, anxiety, dealing with even things that are even greater than anxiety, like, trauma and PTSD, even addiction, some of the stuff. There's an intersection of the both where we deal with those things, but in different things. What I love about coaching is like you are in some state that for the most part, let me put that up, thank you. You're in a state that for the most part, maybe there's dysfunction going on, but you're in a state that can go from healthy to excellent. And in the excellent is like the process of, you know, entrepreneurship is the permanent self-growth. Sign up. To do entrepreneurship, you have to be invested in your own self-growth. And so
Yeah.
that's what I like to offer. What I've found is, number one, I have to be committed to my own self-growth. And that's a good, that's, use the word, dare I? That's a nice lifestyle.
I think that could be I was just going to say, like, we could shout that out louder for those in back who didn't hear that and maybe like paint this on a wall. We need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others in our business. Like, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of the business.
And it's funny, there's a mutuality. Like, you do things in business and you think, oh my God, X, Y, and Z, is it working? Okay, sometimes you only learn that by going out and trying your best to do it. And then you start to learn stuff about oneself that need to be addressed. We only do that. So there's an action component about that. We learn things. We're here to learn things. Okay.
Yeah.
And to learn things about ourselves, but other people. I think, why am I a coach? I think as doing coaching, there's mutual benefit. Yes, it's a profession. Yes, I get paid for it. Yes, I charge for it. Of course, I have to make a living. I'm not doing any good if I'm not making any money, right? And okay, just like therapists are paid or other people are paid. I believe, what I really believe, there's this mutuality to it. When I can help somebody break through something, or they have a huge paradigm shift about how they're viewing their life or their circumstance or their challenge or whatever it may be. When somebody has that breakthrough, what does that do for me as a coach? There is such an immense fulfillment that comes from that. But the fulfillment is me being the best coach that I can, me showing up as the best coach that I can. Does it mean like my life is perfect? No, but I do all the best tools and techniques I can that when I meet somebody, I can meet them exactly where they are and help elucidate the things that need to be addressed, and help elucidate to get to the things that they really want or need.
And then you can show the progress later. I'm guessing there's just this amazing reflection process after time. Like, do you remember what it was like when you first came in my door and we first started this?
That's part of it, because there is some change. There's subtle. You could say it's kind of like the mental gym. You're going to the mental, workout spa, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe day in and day out, you don't notice those changes, but those changes are there. I think it's also a point to validate and affirm those changes as they go on, because it's the same thing with all of us. When we start to change and we see ourselves acting differently, behaving differently, getting different results, well, there is something like consciously we become super aware, like, oh my God, I'm different. And then that becomes a positive cycle. Like the behavior, the wiring changes, like I go in this direction more naturally. Whereas before, maybe I was stuck, because that's just, how things got wired up.
And I like your choice of words. Oh my goodness, I'm different. Instead of, oh, I'm okay now. Oh, I've arrived. Because I think it's important for us, especially as Americans, I'm going to say, to recognize that we are on this learning journey of which there's really no major final finish line. Like, success doesn't mean you have to achieve this. Now you've done it. Like, there's always a nice, but it also means, it doesn't mean that we can't be satisfied either. Like, there's always a growing, and there's always something to learn, and there's always some way that we can grow on the inside if it's not showing up on the outside.
And then there's a give and take in that process. There's times where sometimes like, oh, I really have desires to accomplish these things. Well, sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to go out and just, but then, okay, that's probably not the best motivation to do it, or it's not a sustainable motivation. So sometimes a step back, and I don't really group, but it's a step back to actually grow into the zone. You like a lot of people, and I am repeating coaching speak, so just apologize with the. I think some of my mentors in coaching had the greatest idea, which is like a lot of people say, well, to get your goals, you have to go out of your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, eventually, if it's out of your comfort zone, you're going to go back to your comfort zone. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not really sustainable, but when you can kind of rewire where you are or reconnect with everything, you can reconnect with a more expansive view of yourself. You could connect more spiritually with yourself. You could connect, deeply once you kind of release some junk that needs to be released, then you can actually grow that zone. So then
Absolutely. You can grow
grow.
your comfort zone.
Exactly. It sounds like a trick of language, but it's not.
Yeah.
When you grow that zone, then it becomes more natural. And what happens when you grow that comfort zone? You're safe and secure. You're naturally yourself.
Mhm. And then you're acting from that safe place. And
You're,
that's going to bring better intention from your actions.
yes.
I knew somebody, something you said earlier reminded me of something someone said a long time ago. I was really young. And they said, I'm a big believer that you should never run away from something. You should run to something. And so that was her way of saying, don't motivate yourself to move to another place or make big life change out of fear. Make sure that you are choosing to go where you want to go, make that change because that's what you need. And it's a different mindset. Like it's going to fulfill you. There's a purpose behind it, not just out of fear, not out of a reaction, but you're going there with full intended action. And every once in a while, I remember that.
Well, it's a very good point. And to speak into that a little more, it's like, we all have goals. Okay. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I have a financial goal for my business. Okay. Great. And then sometimes we make really big goals. Okay. We have wants and needs. Okay. I could have a want to make I want to have a big name for myself. Or I have a want like, I want to make this much money in my business. Or I want to have like a want that I want to blow up as an influencer. Those are wants. And I think the purpose of coaching is to get down into the deeper needs, the unconscious needs. Okay. We all have them.
Mm-hmm.
And also to orient those things precisely the way that you're telling. Okay, if there's fears, you're doing this out of fear. Okay, let's find out what that fear is. Where does it come from? And it comes down to fundamental needs. And it comes down to there's an aspect of us that is not expressed or suppressed. Okay. So part of coaching is to be able to release that and then to really recharacterize and reframe everything so that the want and the need are congruent.
So how are these conversations? Obviously, you can't share patient data or anything like that. I get that. But I think what a lot of us in our LGBTQ plus community and where that intersects with the BIPOC community is in the Latina, part of the BIPOC community, the Latino community. How are your conversations pivoting or changing or growing based on the current situation? So obviously there's a new threat and it just keeps growing. It's like one of those Russian dolls where you just keep finding more and more threats as you get down into it. And there's more little surprises like, oh, here's another one. So, how is that changing? How the life and
I think number one, that it will definitely stimulate our deepest fears for myself and for anybody else. We can bring up our deepest fears and our deepest worries, because ultimately, I could relate it to myself because I thought like, I went through this 10, 11-year journey of transitioning. And then all of a sudden it's like, I think I'll relate this. It's not the same. Okay, but I'll relate
Mhm.
this. Going from living as a guy,
Mhm.
transitioning into a woman, and being a trans woman, and then all of a sudden, all living all the stuff that comes up with that, you know. And I think one of the biggest things in my journey was actually being able to let go of white male privilege and acknowledge that I did have that. And then what's the intersection? The intersection all of a sudden is that when we're under the current political circumstance in the US, that all of a sudden we are all connected. Okay, what are the themes? It brings up all of our deepest fears. It brings up all of our deeper traumas. It brings up all of our insecurities. Because ultimately, we want to thrive and live just exactly for who we are and live in a society where our dignity as human beings is preserved and a natural outcome. Okay, now we're living in a society in a time when it really appears the deepest, darkest fear, what it appears is not only is that worse, we're going to become, the deepest fear would like we're going to become an illegal people. Okay, just with the perceived trajectory of all of this. Okay, so I think a lot of first of all, the vulnerabilities we talked about earlier is like, okay, this affects me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have to pretend I'm superwoman or super whoever. Second, I think what this also gives me and gives all of us is like, for many people, I could say BIPOC or people of color, it's like, oh, I have now a lived experience. I'm not going to claim the same thing, but I have a lived experience that is now similar to many things that other people in other communities have gone through. Especially if you're dealing with issues of immigration or status or something like that. Okay, well, those are really big things.
Yeah. So
Will you
there's
live for?
commonality. We're
Yeah,
finding some commonality in that's
I
the intersection, you think?
yes, I think there's a commonality is that you know
Or empathy?
I think commonality. There's empathy, and I think there's that we all have resiliency. We all have courage, and it just will come in different unique flavors for each person in each community. Yet we all have these characteristics. The point is to tap into those.
Now, how
And
do we?
I think,
How do we tap into this resiliency and grow that for both our personal and our professional life? Because I'm sure you're hearing as a life coach who is helping people with both their personal and their professional crossroads of decision making, growth, change. A lot of my trans friends are looking for jobs. And it's not just jobs, they're looking for a career. And normally that wasn't as difficult. It was kind of difficult, but now they're feeling like it is just impossible. So, are you hearing the same thing? Is it just my little pocket of friends? And how are you helping them with that?
I think number one, part of the resiliency is mutual encouragement. We all need each other.
Yeah, we do.
We all need to recognize our strengths, our weaknesses, but we all need each other. And literally, literally the thing when we can hold space for just one person, we're holding space for ourselves at the same time. And so really to do that, there's just simple things we can do to hold space for ourselves, doing grounding and connecting. There's a myriad of beautiful tools, even on YouTube or things like that. But
Mhm.
to practice, but first of all, to support each other.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't have to be on an island upon ourselves. And one of the most frail human emotions is at times we feel that we are. I'm all alone. Nobody feels it's almost like the abandoned child in a way. We'll have experienced that emotionally, by this realistic threat that's out there. So I think that holding space for each other, being patient with each other, being patient with ourselves, being kind to ourselves, acknowledging when we're vulnerable. And I think there's a quality, learning how to hold space is something we develop with time. Yes, I'm trained as a life coach, but anybody can hold space. It's, when when a human being feels heard and understood, when we feel that we're heard, understood at a deep level, that is one of the most validating things
Yeah.
we can experience as two people. So, for human beings, we're social people. Even if we're introvert or extrovert or ambivert or however we're still people.
Mhm.
And so I think it is crucial, like all different flavors of support groups that we have in community, every one of those are so important because there's an aspect of holding space.
And belong.
And oh yeah.
I think belonging is something that is way more important than anybody realizes. And we saw that in the youth during COVID times. That was a huge issue, especially for BIPOC kids. They were trying to feel like they belonged, and trans kids, they need to feel like they belong. And now we as adults as well need to feel like we belong. And when the rhetoric is that we don't belong here, from a current president, I think we have to remember that, well, that's just his opinion. We can all remind each other that we actually do belong. And I've been tapping into my Frida Kahlo a little bit, and she says that we can endure much more than we think we can. And it's like, oh yeah, talking the woman who had nearly every bone in her body broken in multiple places and was bedridden for years, and also was bisexual and, dealt with a lot. It's like, okay, yeah, okay. Like we can endure a lot.
This week, there's a friend of mine in Los Angeles, and he's a cinematographer. He does film, but he's expressly dedicated to documenting our communities. The LGBTQ plus community. He's and he did this film. I didn't, I didn't come out till later in life. Okay, but he did this film about a lady. It was a transgender lady in the 80s who headed up the ACT UP movements in California. And her name was Connie Norman. I didn't know that name, but my friend documented it. And then when I talked to many other people in my community, and when I was living in Los Angeles at the time, they're like, oh, yes, I remember her. So he wanted to document those people, but he has this film called Connie Norman, the AIDS Diva. Okay. Ooh. I get emotional thinking about it. And it's really a model of activism. It's a model of community. And she was that model because she was a lady who came from the streets, as many trans people did. And then she just had a gift for organizing, but she had a gift of being able to talk to people at any level. Okay. And then turn that into activism, which was what we now know as the ACT UP movement. And in the late 70s and early 80s, she was a person who had a view of trans that we now have right now, which is, the two-spirit, so on and so forth. Whereas we had this very, demarked view of gender. Okay. Whenever that film, I've seen that film by my friend several times, but there's something in it that really touches me. So I think also a very useful tool is actually knowing some of our history, but more specifically also knowing people, seeing the real people,
Yeah.
because sometimes we may think like activism is a superhero thing or supporting each other is no, it's actually sometimes the most mundane thing ever that translates into bigger things. Or for me, I derive inspiration from people that I've seen in the past overcome unbelievable things. Like you're talking on the subject of Frida Kahlo. I think about the people who fought against apartheid in South Africa during that time. And there's amazing, like if you look at the dignity that these people espoused, it's stunning, Gary. You know,
Yeah.
I think we all have a version of that going on. And it doesn't mean we have to be the person with the megaphone. But what it does mean that I think what it does call on us is a deeper spiritual sense of ourselves. And I use spiritual in the most broadest term.
Yeah.
I'm not the other, like the big religious word. I'm saying
Right.
spiritual. And I think that does get into a deeper mission. I deeply believe we all have a mission that we can uniquely fulfill. That's why we're here. And doing so is like that's unbelievable. That's an unbelievable life to live
It
what you're meant.
is. It
And
is.
when I work with people, but if I want to say a message, I like to say that message over and over. We have a mission in the present moment, exactly how we are. The hardest thing about life is everything's contained in the present. And all of us, even myself as a coach, we get out of the present. I get obsessed about the past, or I fixate on the future that isn't here yet. Instead of looking, if I want to know about the past, well, look where I am right now. That was my
Yeah.
past. If I want to look towards the future, what am I doing right? That that's making my future. So this act of being present, you brought up earlier, like U.S. society, like, oh, I'm gonna be good when I have this job and I have this position or I have this. Okay,
If I
and I
just make this amount of money, I'll be fine. It's like
or
not all.
when I have this relationship. Okay,
Yeah.
which kind of presupposes there's something missing. Okay, and instead, like, well, I'm really good, even with my glaring faults. I'm good where I am right now, and I'm doing my best right now. And I think in this current circumstance is number one to have all of us be in this place. And that's something, it's not like, oh, I got it, I'm going to do this forever. That's just a daily practice. Like we go to a gym and work out so that our body's in good shape, in good form. It's the same thing spiritually and mentally,
Hmm.
whether it be through meditations or whether it be through mindset or whether it be through therapy or whatever. There's a myriad of things to be done. So I I really think definitely in the broader sense of community, there's more of a coming together. I feel yes, it for me seeing the most helpless people in our communities affected, seeing trans youth to be the first victims of this, it's ooh, that fires me up.
Yeah.
Because, when I've been in community and I see parents who support their trans youth, or I see trans youth who have the ability to be themselves, it does something to me because I grew up in a time in a generation where that didn't exist.
Yep.
Second, this is just, I don't want to say that this is Pollyannaism. Okay.
Right.
I don't feel this can endure what's going on. I don't. And I just don't, you know, so I think our voice, wherever it may be, whether it's just with ourselves, with the people that are important to us, or even our families, our voices in our lives are extraordinarily important. They're extraordinarily, we all have this dignity.
Mhm.
And I think part of being quote unquote different, well, here's the interesting thing is like more and more people are claiming their own identity. If there's anything we have in common, we're all a little bit different. Okay. I think that yes, I'm seeing like access to jobs, for trans or now that DEI is being revoked. Okay.
Mhm.
Or social services are being broken and revoked. Okay, those are huge, huge things.
Mhm.
Uh, those are fear-reducing things because the people's lives depend on that.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
so I think I feel like we talked out early, like many people. We talked earlier about some people wanting to leave the country, and that's been my inner dialogue and dialogue I've had with other people. I think I want to do my best to live a life that I dreamed of, which is being here and being able to travel freely between states. Now, what I do see is, that, there's all this thing of denial of passports.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's based on trans status. Okay. Did that induce fear in me? Oh yeah. Yeah, it did. Yet at the same point, I still have my own dreams and aspirations. I think there's some people who may leave out of necessity, and that is good. Or there may be people who want to leave but can't because they may not have the resources to be able to leave. Okay. So I think if there's one thing that I see right now, like, yeah, there's all the things that people are struggling with, and it's very real with what they're being affected by.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Yet on the other hand, what I do see, and maybe this is the Pollyanna thing, is that I see a realization of how we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
When we're not connected with ourselves and we're not connected with others, then sometimes we start to live in isolation. And then that's when this stuff really, our potential to be really swept aside by all of this is huge, And I tend to be a person, like, when I resolve really deep stuff, I kind of want to go into my little girly cave or whatever and watch too much YouTube or something like that.
Yeah.
That's all fine. I
But I
just,
think to
I'm
that,
sorry.
it's so important when we talk about everything that you've just been mentioning, how we can help be there for each other is simply give ourselves a quota of one friend a day to reach out to. Reach out to minimally just one person and just say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? How can I be here for you? And just as somebody who would get that message, I know firsthand what it feels like to get that message. Like, oh, maybe I do matter, or maybe I do belong. That right there is showing that we are strong. We are for each other. We can support each other. And then it's not our job to 100% lift everybody up to the top. That's a lot of weight that we might all feel. But in addition to ourselves, when we might already feel like we're just deflated. But if we can get just that little bit of love out there to other people and just remind everybody that you love, like, I love you, you matter, you're beautiful, you do amazing things. I'm so glad you're here. And what else can I do to be here for you? And if we all do that, we're going to be just fine. And to your point, it's not going to allow a lot of the current policies to stick. If our inspiration can stick instead, like glitter showing up everywhere. And we have hope here in Wisconsin, and we just showed that,
Yes.
the anti-trans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
The anti-trans ad Elon Musk spent millions of dollars on did not work. We still, despite those efforts, voted for Susan Crawford. So I think it's also important to celebrate the little wins and do a little therapy dance when we need to shake off the bad stuff. It's like, hold on, we got some good stuff. We can dance.
To me, that was a huge win, and I think it's a model, because I'm going to use a big word and it sounds like this, but there's an aspect of walking into and claiming our own authority. One, and just as a person, as a human being, as a person who belongs to these greater communities. Okay. And there's the alleged perception of power. So there's a perception of power, which is money and publication and status and all this kind of stuff, right? But then at the end of the day, some of that can be, you can have all that stuff, but then, there's a financial investor once told me that in this, he said, money's the great enabler. If you're a kind and generous person and you come into a lot of money, you're going to be a very kind and generous person. If you're an arrogant person, money's only going to amplify it. It's only going to enable that. You're going to be a much more angry and arrogant person. Okay. So I think in this case, it's a lesson. It's a lesson point of what we can really do, you know.
Yeah.
And you should as well, I'd be, beginning of a new model of hope. And, I can definitely say you know, how do I say, I'm 65 years old. So I was a child. My childhood was the 60s. Okay. So, that spirit's still in me, even though I'm older. So, I think the right strategic actions have a lot. Like even the people like, okay, we're going to acknowledge the companies that support DEI. And it's a good thing. DEI is a great thing. It's a great
Yeah.
thing to have. It's a great thing because that is good business. That should be.
Exactly.
And also it's good because I think in a weird way, it removes some of the false to it, where it's just what we would call the pink washing. Like, oh, let me just sell a flag in my store and I'll make money off of you.
The tokenism gets washed away into the street drains. And then you've got people who are like, well, like, hello, I am a proud Apple chick. Like, I got my MacBook, I got my iPhone, I'm like, got all my matchy stuff. But yeah, I was like so happy that Apple stood by their DEI initiatives and we're like, yeah, no, we're not.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's perfect. The thing is, all right, I'm going to use, it's a tool in, I'm trained in coaching and NLP and a whole bunch of other modes. There's a tool in NLP, but it comes back from Carl Jung. It's called perception is projection. And what that really means is what we perceive is actually how our brain, how we're wired up, and we project that out into the world. Like, hey, if I'm hurt and angry about stuff, guess what kind of things I'm going to find in my life? I'm going to find a lot of hurt and anger. Okay. It doesn't mean, what it does mean is let me reconcile the part of me that's hurt and angry.
Yeah.
Release all those connections and have a new relationship. It doesn't mean that hurt and anger goes away. What it means is the connections and relationships in the representations inside our brain are now different. And so when you go out into the world, it's like, again, it's not like living in denial or Pollyannaism, but it's living from a point where, okay, there's all this terrible stuff going on. And at the same time, there's these victories going on too. Let me embrace those victories. Let me be very real about what's going on and how it may affect me. And at the same time, let me not hopefully wallow in the things about me that may not be serving me as well as they should be. So I think the key is kind of like an awareness of how we work, how I work, how my brain works, how your brain may work. And that's why I think that, this act of supporting each other, which I think is an act of dialogue, which is an act of affirmation of our humanity, but it's also when we feel supported, when we feel somebody gets me, when we feel known, seen, heard, it's almost like there's all the shit out there, yet we feel so motivated and empowered to express ourselves. Okay?
We can create a tidal wave of change, a tsunami of change, but it just takes a bunch of us getting together to make the big, make the movement. And this reminds me on a water theme. Unfortunately, I grew up around a lot of water, so I get this. One of my favorite life metaphors is a wakeboarding lesson where my instructor was like, okay, so Laura, the thing is, keep your weight over your board and don't look down or you're going to fall down. Look where you want to go and you're naturally going to go in that direction. And I just like, wow, that is the best life metaphor ever. So to your point, if you look at the disaster and you focus on everything that's going wrong, you're just going to keep heading that way. But if we, and I mean, sure, we got to look in our side view mirror every once in a while, but it's important to look forward, focus on what we really need and want out of our life, and understand who it is that we're surrounding ourselves with to help support us in that forward motion.
I think also another important thing is, and something I had to do is, we consume media.
Yeah.
Let's be very mindful of what we consume.
Mm-hmm.
And I that's what I actually had to learn during the COVID and the lockdown and all of that, because all of it was like, and it's like I can't it's like consuming the worst food ever, but it's for our heart and soul or our mind. And so, yes, we need to be informed, or we can be informed as we need to be. But yeah, at the same point, there's times when it's like, turn off the TV or the phone or computer or whatever it is, and find the other way to engage your senses that are really supportive of you.
Mm-hmm. Art therapy, still my favorite thing. That just means doodling.
At least some people doing some verses of rap, or being in nature, or going to the gym and doing a big workout, or I don't know. But it's
Dancing
like
while we do dishes.
but it's like being mindful. Like, I felt there's times I got affected where I was watching too much news. And it's like at a certain point they tell you it's their take on things, but that's just their take on things. But then if you watch it over and over and over and over and over, you're just cementing that into your mind. And so, yes, let's acknowledge the realities that are going on. They are very real. Okay. And at the same time, we can do the things for us that support us. I think an important thing is like, number one, we have to deal with our fundamental emotions. We have to deal with our fears. We have to deal with our insecurities, all that type of stuff. Yet we have to deal with that in a place that is the right place to hold space for ourselves, or the people to hold space for us. So then it gets into the, okay, what does that look like? What does it look like when you have people who hold space for you? And it's so I think it's that, number one, our negative experiences, our darker experiences, our shadows, they have to kind of be elicited or brought to the surface. Yet at the same point, it's brought to the surface so we can get to a better place. Okay. And sometimes being brought to the surface, that can be a day by day thing, a hourly thing. I think one of the most important things for myself is really grounding and connecting. I think that when the election first happened, then I'm like, how do I put this? I've talked with a lot of other trans activists. I've, talked with, I know one lady, she's a trans activist, very sharp. She was telling, it's like kind of, I've known this was going to happen since for a long time. Or I've been aware. Let me put it, a better way to put it is I've had awareness.
Yeah.
When it was first shared with me many, many, many years ago, I'm like, that's crazy. Why? That's like, come on, that's extreme. It wouldn't be that extreme. No, nothing could be that extreme. Of course, so I rejected it when I first heard it. But then as time went on, it's like, oh, actually. So, and so the biggest debate, I'm going to talk about myself. We all have a struggle with this,
Yeah.
and then that talks into doing this. So like, what do I see in the community? I see this whole range of stuff, whether it be denial or satisfaction through through vice, which, sex figures in big into that one. And, or, you know, extreme association with the most horrible outcome, which there's a lot horrible going on. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge, I think part of coaching that I love, and it's not easy, it's like when you're faced with a challenge, it's something called the all possibilities. And the thing is to place ourselves in a place of resourcefulness in the all possibilities. Like the thing is, like, if we get so fixated, like, I don't want situation X.
Yeah.
Okay. But I really want situation Y. Okay. In my case, what I really wanted, I wanted to have kind of my dream was, my coaching business really blows up big time. And at the same time, I wanted to have a second residency in Europe. Okay. This whole thing going on. Okay, let's just say this wasn't going on. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Now juxtapose all of a sudden the thought space I had to go through and the possibilities and what I've been working on myself and what I want to offer to other people is I'd imagine, well, maybe I can't not able to do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe I just want to escape this country because that's a conversation I have a lot.
I was wondering how many conversations you're having with people who are like, I can't live in this country anymore. I just
Right,
can't. It's
right.
not safe for me. And if it means moving to another country, because that immediately, like my previous podcast guest, Dee Gray, was saying, just by moving to another country, it immediately removes the threat my children face. That's
Oh,
all I have to do is just move to a different
yeah.
country, and that threat is gone, just like that. Like, why wouldn't I do that for my children as a loving parent? And so I'm curious how many people are taking big extreme action because of the big extreme changes happening at the Capitol.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a reality and
Yeah.
it's happening. For me, it's um I think on the scene, it's like, okay, if I go into another country, like what's the dark side of myself I experience because of this? Fear and like I've basically what I could say is I see my worst fears being realized, actually happening, like like a nightmare happening.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if I want to go to another country, I don't want to go with a mindset of I'm going there because I'm a refugee of this insanity. I want to go there from a place of, you know, my own empowerment and my own authority. And
Yes.
so whoever you are, wherever you are emotionally, spiritually, so forth, wherever we take, wherever that is, we just take that and recreate it wherever we are. Second, there is a big calling of purpose. This is a very, you know, it's an important time.
Yeah.
I think to, so for me personally, I want both these things I just said to you. I do. I don't want to move to another country out of fear. It may be necessary. Will I make a plan B in a go bag?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I am working. I think the biggest thing I had to see in myself is like, oh, I move really slow on some of these issues, or I delay dealing with them until it's like absolutely necessary. I did talk to my friend who I think she was just plugged into, before there was something named Project 2025, she knew all this stuff. She knew
Yeah.
this was the agenda. And I've known that. But then when the actual reality happens, it's a different thing. It is funny because, I had all these thoughts where I in 2022, I moved to Arizona and I bought a home in Phoenix. And
Mhm.
then there's like, ooh, should I move back to California? And there's like, well, I don't know. No. My deepest fear, my deepest fear, and I'm talking my deepest fear because then that's what I can talk into with other people.
Mhm.
So like I'm just
Mhm.
being very vulnerable. My
Yeah.
deepest fear was that to have all my legality and legitimacy removed. And as a second token of that, that my access to medical needs as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's horrifying. It's horrible because it's already started. It started on day one with
Yep.
trans kids. We're taking out on the least defensible, least group of people who can defend themselves outside of their parents, which is trans kids. And so, and it's just like, oh my God, it's our own version of, you know, dare I say the word? It's like, you know, next.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a reality, you know, and but here's what this is just my intuitive. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to, like when we get overly associated with a negative thing, or we get overly associated with a positive thing. Okay. Like
Mhm.
getting over associated with a negative thing, then it's like we disengage our power. When we get, if we get, because we all have internal power. We all have spiritual power. We all have just power that we don't even know. Okay?
Untapped power.
We absolutely do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I look on the long stretch of things, like I've looked back at people who lived through dictatorships, or looked at people who I admired, artists who I admired, who they're actually, because their country was in a dictatorship, they got banished, and then they returned triumphantly. So I really think it's to look as a coach for myself, to place myself in the most resourcefulness I can. It doesn't mean that I'm like, I'm invincible or anything like that, but it is being vulnerable in the right ways, the right time, in the right people, in the right circumstance. Does it mean I bleed my wounds to everybody? Of course not. And they're wounds that are going to heal and be scars, and then those scars become beautiful. Okay.
That's
Number one, we
beautiful.
all, yeah,
Just that thought that our scars can become beautiful.
yeah,
I think there's so much energy spent on the, oh no, what if? I'm scared. It's so hard to think through to the other side of that and the resiliency that we have possible, the possible resiliency.
no,
Mhm. So glad that we had this talk.
but thank you. It's a pleasure. It's really a pleasure. I'm sorry it's been so long since we talked. And yeah,
Well,
it's
we'll
like,
have to change that.
absolutely. It's really, it, I feel like, yes, this is a dialogue about stuff in community, but it's also like just having a discussion together.
100%. Now, on that, do you have anybody that you need to give a little shout out to? Anybody that you would need to share some gratitude to?
Wow. Okay. It's so funny. Gratitude.
I think it's so important, gratitude.
Yeah. If I think of one thing, especially on this topic, how would I say, like a lot of us, especially myself, I led a closeted life before I came out. And then I kind of expressed myself on social media, the internet, or the internet back in the day, which is much different than right now.
Yeah.
When I want to express gratitude, I haven't talked to her in a long time. There was one friend in the internet community. She helped me come out. She encouraged me to come out. And so I always look at her, or that person. I think she said the right thing at the right time. Like, what are you waiting for? It sounded like a simple, what are you waiting for? What's going to be different next week or next month or next year? What are you really waiting for? And somehow it was the right question at the right time and the thing I needed to hear. So her name is Emmy. I
Thank
think
you, Emmy.
I'll probably, but she helped me come out. So I really, it just has such a peak emotional, coming out is a peak emotional experience. But I really appreciated that person who was there for me to help me come out as trans woman.
That's wonderful. That's great. And what do you need? You are so good at helping everybody else. You talk about how you're recognize that you need to grow as a person in order to help others grow and find what they need. Um, what do you need from our community right now?
Um, it's funny. I think when I think about this is from our community, I just want to reconnect in a more profound way. In a more profound way, maybe it has many different aspects. So in the beginnings, it's coming out. And then the other thing is like, oh, living the life. And second, oh, living in gay community, so on and so forth. And then after a while, it's just living my life. I think for me is reconnecting with the community in the most profound way. Possible, which is, all the stuff going on. So that's, so please, I think reach out and we can have a dialogue. And it doesn't necessarily, could be a client or it doesn't even have to be a client. I think more deeper connect to the community because we're made up of amazing people. When you really see the talents and the abilities that we all have, it's really beautiful. And so I want to see, I think I want to reconnect. Maybe in the beginnings I was connecting out of needs, and now there's a different need, I think, for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. How can people reach out to you? How do you want them to contact you?
Okay. Wow. I mean, I'm on, I'm on traditional social media under my name, Tawni Acosta. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I do spend time on Facebook. Starting to go to TikTok a little more nowadays. You can reach me on social media. I also have a website for my LLC, which is called Empowered Journeys. And I'll send you the link. It's called empowered-journeys.com. And you can reach out to me there, or you could just send me a private message on any social media.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this time together. So many beautiful golden nuggets and glitter that you.
Oh, the glitter. Let's go with the glitter.
Yeah, I sprayed some glitter on my face for today.
Oh, wow. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Well, I thank you. I just really enjoyed talking with you, and by extension, everybody else who may be hearing this. And, thank you so much. It's truly a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
We should talk soon, and maybe even talk soon on the podcast or other ways we can carry on the conversation.
Absolutely. When I get this other book written, it'll be a little while yet, but when I get that finished, maybe I can ask you to read it.
Oh, sure.
Or at least portions of it.
All right.
Okay, but hello, beautiful humans. Thank you so much for watching. In the description of this video will be a special link to sign up for my newsletter. And when you do, you're going to get an email with a secret code to get the ebook version of my gender-neutral, interchangeable action novel with 29 different endings and multiple ways to get there. It's just my way of thanking you for enduring me growing this wonderful podcast to amplify the less represented or misunderstood voices. Thank you so much.